Where do I look? Straight ahead.
Yeah, that's a camera right there.
Cool.
Pat, this is this is on the other side of the camera oftentimes from your background.
Yeah, this is now I know what everybody felt like every time I told them to get in front of the Zoom and talk to the media. So I'm glad you didn't broadcast to some of my former athletes. They would have enjoyed this.
All right, Jeremy, how about it?
Cool. Hey, Patrick, Jeremy Warner from 24/7 Sports. Nice to meet you. Welcome to Champaign.
Appreciate it. Nice to meet you.
Yeah, first of all, just take me through how this happened. I know you have a history with Bret, and why this specific job was an opportunity you wanted.
Yeah, I mean, I've got a past with Bret, obviously, from Illinois or from Arkansas and our time together there. But we've always kept in touch. And so when he got hired, obviously it was a quick text and his world was spinning. And I was, coming out of a Pac-12 championship game. And, it was a long evening for me and getting back. And we kind of touch base. And then, it was probably a handful of days later, we touched base again around Christmas time. And that's how we've always been. We just kept in touch. And as you guys have probably learned a little bit and we'll learn, like Coach thinks very forward. He's always forward thinking about what's the next step. And we started talking about player development and NIL stuff coming down the road. And it wasn't real clear what it was going to be at that point. And then, it came down a few days later and he kind of presented something and thoughts and how did I feel about it? Because it was a change, obviously, for me as 17 years being in communications. But there are a lot of the aspects of comms that are going into this role when it comes to developing relationships with the student athletes and helping them with all of the stuff that's coming down the road. So that's the part of the job that I had for the past 17 years that I love the most. And there's a ton of that in this current position. And that's what really drew me to the job and this unique position. So that was kind of a baseline of what drew me in. And obviously knowing what I know about the university and the athletic department, and then obviously with Coach B and some of the people that I knew he was bringing in.
Yeah, this might seem a little elementary, but like, what is the actual job description? Like, what are you attacking right now?
Yeah, so it's really unique. And I think, and I don't know how many programs have a position like this. I know there's probably people in programs that have responsibilities that are, tagged to this job, but to have someone solely focused on student athletes, I'll get to know them right away. I'll start having individual meetings with everybody and learning their story and learning who they are and how I need to approach them and help them learn the branding part of this and what could potentially be coming down the road. So the NIL stuff is obviously a huge part of it. And that's not just a flip of the switch. Here's your opportunity. It's an education process. It's a earning their trust process. It's learning their story, figuring out the external part of how do we tell their story, through the comms and everything else, and me helping connect us to that. And so the NIL part of it and the branding part of it is a huge part. Obviously, the social calendar stuff, they do a really good job here with the social media, and my job, and that is connecting our building to everybody else and making sure there's a lot of follow through, there's communication, everybody knows what's going on. And you'll see that with Coach. He loves to have people in the building. He loves people to feel connected to his program. And so that's what my job is going to make sure people feel connected to the program, and we can do the best job of relaying those stories to our fans and start building that stuff and building that branding that those kids need.
And then is your goal, I mean, the NIL, I know there's a lot to be determined about those rules, but is your goal to help Illinois, sell that to their opportunities here to that student athlete, that this could be what you could benefit on the NIL?
100%. It's the position is, to get back to your other question, the position is to be involved in the student athletes from the recruitment process all the way through their career here and beyond. It's not just a 4-year or 5-year window. It's when they start getting recruited, and we're developing what that is, obviously, because there's a lot of things still to learn. And I say that we've got to educate our student athletes. I've got to educate myself too. There's a lot to figure out still. But the process is from their recruitment all the way through their time here and beyond. There's nothing better than getting text messages from former student athletes that you've worked with at different stops and they're still looking advice, or they're still saying hello, or they ask you a question, that's what we want the position to be.
Thank you. Welcome.
Thanks.
Yeah, I guess my first question is there, with the NIL vote that was supposed to happen in January being put off, like how much does that affect what you're initially doing? And, it's said that, they just needed to pause. There was something that came up. It'll, if that's pushed off 6 months to a year, does that, change your approach to this first year? How does that work?
No, you have to be prepared, so there's a lot of preparation that's going to go into understanding the NIL, obviously, but there's steps that you got to make before it even starts. So if you're not preparing when it hits, you're just not going to be ready to potentially take advantage of it. So like I talked about, it's meeting with the student athletes right away, and we got 100+ guys that I've got to sit down with and talk to them and help them understand what my role is. And we've got to find out how we're going to effectively tell their stories and start to educate them with guest speakers and other programs. The athletics department has a deal with Open Doors. It's a company that helps them provide, photos and videos to student athletes and their platforms to use. And that's a platform that is really vital to the next step. And that there's going to be a lot of learning that goes into that. And there'll be bigger steps with that company that are coming. So there's a lot of educating. There's a whole long list of things to do. So no matter if this thing is delayed or it comes soon, we've got a lot of steps to prepare for. So when it crosses over, that we're ready.
And then when when you say you have other duties that kind of relate to your history in comms, can you go into some of that, like what as a football SID, what you learn that you can bring to this role? So,
like I said, the best thing about my role in comms for 17 years, and especially football, because it was so many student athletes, it was learning all those personalities. Every kid is different, and how you approach them is different, and you have to learn their story, and you have to have a trust with them. I've been really fortunate. My career has taken me to a lot of different places around the country and different corners of the United States. So kids from different parts of the country are different. How they react to things, and my experiences at each one has taught me a lot. So that I took a lot of pride in that as a football comms person, of learning the kid's story and understanding how to approach them. Because if they've had a bad practice, or they've had a bad day, or they've had a good day, you've got to learn how to approach them in the right way, in the right time. And all of that translates to this position. And that's what the part that really excited me about the job when Coach was talking to me about it was, it's easily the part I enjoyed the most, and impacting their lives and the student athlete experience is 100% why I remained in college athletics for so long. So all of that translates over. And then, helping comms in my role is with schedules and stuff like that. And they've got a great crew here, and with Kent and Brett, and I've already had a lot of conversations with them, and anything I can do in my role in the building to help them when they're busy. And we all know with what's going on in the spring and a lot of sports playing, I'm happy to help in that way too. So there's a lot of transformation. There's a lot of crossover from my old job to this one.
And then I guess my last question is that it's kind of a complicated question, and maybe Coach Bielema would have to speak to this, but do you see this NIL stuff and this position meaning possibly more player media access, kind of more openness, more, Illinois has had 5 head coaches the last 10 years. So there have been way different ways that Kent and his staff have had to approach media player relations. Can you give us an idea of what you foresee for this staff?
No, I mean, I'm not going to get into their world. I think Coach will decide that. I can give you my experience from with him at Arkansas, and he did a great job he'll have great relationships with the media. He'll know a lot about you. He'll joke with you. I think I caught the tail end of his thing the other day where he was having a good time with people's Zoom backgrounds. That's Coach. That's how he is every day. And I'll let him decide the access point. I know that's a tough subject now with all the rules in place and things that have gone on, having gone through a football season, and been through different access points for different coaches. So Can't answer that, but I know that he wants people to know his student athletes. He wants them to understand them and understand their stories and bring that personal fact. That's how he treats everybody in the building, everybody he meets. So that's going to be extended through student athletes for sure.
Thanks.
Hey, Pat, Alec Bussey, Orange and Blue News, Rivals.com. Thanks for doing this. With name, image, likeness kind of, I guess, in waiting by the NCAA, what has your communication been like, or if you had communication with players or recruits on what it could look like moving forward? Because it seems to be kind of a guessing game right now.
Yeah, I'm really early into this, so my communication, I haven't spoken to recruits yet. Like I said, I'm going through a lot of the training on what they're using here currently, and Open Doors is something that I'm getting used to now, and that's a platform that we'll use. Then we'll start developing talking points and things of that nature to hit with recruits. I mean, I've walked around the building obviously quite a bit and met some of our current student athletes, and you'd be surprised how many guys don't really know what NIL is. You look at them and you start to tell them I have to explain what I'm doing, and a couple of them are like, what's NIL? And you start to explain it to them, and that's why we need to prepare now. So when it hits, they're ready to go. So there's a lot of educating that has to be done in those meetings, but I'm excited. I mean, I walked to the building, and first couple guys I saw were OC and DJ, and I had some familiarity with Deerfield Beach with a couple guys I've worked for. So DJ smiled and we had a good conversation, and OC, I'll meet with him soon and we'll talk about what he wants, where he sees himself going and what he wants to do. So there's personalities in this building. There's no doubt about it. We've got to find them, and we've got to bring them out and make these guys feel comfortable to have some fun and also expand their brand. So there's a lot still to figure out. And as my time here grows, I'll have a better handle on some of those processes.
When you were responding to Robert's last question, you said something along the lines of Coach Bielema really likes to get his players out there and get them in kind of the public light. Do you have an idea of, I guess, how much that could help players with NIL moving forward if it were to get passed?
A ton. It starts local, right? And that's what we always tell our guys. You've got to start telling your story at the local level, and you've got to get to know the people that tell those stories. Because when you get to the next level or whatever you want to do, I always tell guys before they go to the combine, we would try to prepare guys for that experience, and I would always have people reporters reach out from a national level, say, hey, we're really thankful that your local guys had some of these stories and they were able to do some of these things. So we were able to expand on those when we met them. That's part of it. But yeah, the local stuff is, we need to be in the community. People need to know their faces. They need to know who they are. And yeah, that's going to help them locally with potentially whatever NIL allows. So yeah, it starts right here. We gotta tackle that first.
And then last one, based on your research and I guess your knowledge of NIL and the personalities that are inside the Smith Center within the team, is there a specific strategy to getting different personalities with different organizations to make them more successful, or is that just too broad and you don't know yet?
Yeah, that's a little broad. I mean, you got to make sure they're comfortable at the start of things, and that's what they want to do, because the reality is, some student athletes may not want to go down this road and they just choose not to. So that's where those meetings are really vital, in understanding what they see themselves becoming, or how aggressive do they eventually want to be with this. So yeah, it's a little broad right now, but it's a good question, and hopefully some answers soon.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yep.
Hey, Patrick, Joey Wagner with 24/7 Sports. You said you and Brett obviously go back to Arkansas, but how did this really kind of blossom? And why do you think you were a guy that he came to for such a unique opportunity? Can you just kind of take me into the relationship with him a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, you guys have met Coach, and everybody's probably said, I mean, he's number one, he's a really genuine person. So just a quick story. My first interaction with Coach, I was a basketball communications person for most of my career, through Florida Gulf Coast, and then I went to Arkansas. And our boss had left the season prior, and we were in spring football, and I had never worked football, and I was out at spring football practice helping our primary guy at the time, who was really the secondary, and I was just helping at a spring practice. I was on the sideline. There was some media there, and he came over to me after the media maybe ushered out, and I was still helping with notes and doing some things at practice. And he just came up and said, you know, you're the basketball guy, right? I said, yeah. And he said, are you interested in this job? I said, yeah. You know, I was the interim at the time. And I went into his office and we talked for 45 minutes after spring practice, which was probably pretty unique for a Power 5 football coach, just to pull some guy he's never met into his office afterwards. And we talked for 45 minutes. And I walked out and called my girlfriend and said, man, I really want this job. I really want this job. And I always lean back on that conversation because that immediate connection was there, just because of how genuine of a person he is. You know, during my 3 years with him at Arkansas, you know, obviously we went through ups and downs together, you know, and we really learned a lot about each other. And that's one thing about Coach is he's going to invest himself into your life. And he did that with me, and it's a unique deal. And, you know, I always knew that I wanted to work for him again. And, you know, we kept in touch his whole time in the NFL on a pretty regular basis. And when this opportunity came and he reached out and he started to explain it, it was more about figuring out what the job was than, you know, where I was moving to, or, you know, because I was good. And when it became real and all the stuff started to iron out, it was a no-brainer for me. So just it's hard to find a better person to work for and with than Coach. And that was a huge draw.
And it seemed, he talked to, I think the last time we talked with him, he said he wanted to be on the cutting edge of a lot of this stuff. And being on that means there's not really a playbook in the background for you to read and learn and do. How do you craft that playbook? Are there people you can go to? How do you go about building this?
Yeah, no question about it. That's, you know, the first week and change on the job, you just kind of, you know, I saw that video of the weekend over, you know, the video that everybody's tweeting out. That's me for the first handful of days on this job, like trying to figure things out, right? Like there's a lot to figure out anyways, being in a new place with new staff and learning new names. But yeah, there'll be some of that with the job. But I've got a really good framework for what I want to put together. And I'm doing that now, and I'm trying to keep myself on that framework. But the biggest piece is also coming in and learning what everybody else does and what everybody else touches in the athletic department and has a hand in the football program, because I want to make sure I'm not coming in and blowing up what other people are doing, not just from an NIL standpoint, but from how are we branding the football program? How are we communicating on social, you know, those type of things. So it's really learning what everybody's talents are and what they're doing. And that's the baseline. And then as I'm doing that, I'm frameworking what is the educational piece and how we want to structure this NIL stuff as we ramp up that stuff in the spring.
Then you said, 17 years in this field, obviously the social media aspect has changed a ton over the course of that. How has that evolved in the way that you go about branding, or the way that you have to think, certain details through?
Yeah, you try to figure out your strengths on each platform. And, it started when I was at Florida Gulf Coast and we had our Sweet 16 run, and we came up with the Dunk City hashtag and broke all our websites and broke all our, all that fun stuff. And that's when my shift my focus shifted to the branding side of things. Like, oh my gosh, this is a different deal. And that's, when I was at Arkansas, and I had a great boss there that it really structured us differently and made us think differently. And since then, I think more of how do we connect this to our fans? How do we connect to recruits? How is this helping us sell tickets? So it's just a mindset of how each piece of content relates to a different platform or different person. So yeah, it's on top of the comms role, it's a lot, and I can 17 years of doing the comms role and doing a lot of social stuff. What folks go through. So to have my role and be able to assist with some of those ideas when they're so crazy busy, and I can help with some of the content and some of those things, I think, like you said, Bret thinks ahead. He's thinking uniquely about how can we really take this thing to another level and provide a unique piece. So yeah, it's a social media is a never stop. You always got to be thinking ahead. And I think that's one of the things I can really help with, and be dedicated, have a piece of my job, be dedicated to that.
Thank you. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
Hi, Patrick. Colin Likas from the News Gazette. It's good to meet you and welcome to Champaign.
Thanks.
I want to build off a couple questions people have asked because you've mentioned several times telling people's stories. Can you kind of expand upon that, just what that means to you in general and how you really plan to go about that? I know it's different for different people and you have to consider NIL, but just in general, when you say telling people's stories, what you really mean by that?
So that's where that's a big part of the meetings with each student athlete is kind of learning their story and then finding out what they're comfortable telling. And from there, it's a kind of an ideation process of what's the best platform to tell this on. Is it something we do through the media? Is it something we do through, Big Ten Network? Is it something you got to find the right platform for that? But also it can obviously expand to different platforms and everybody can tell it too. So we want fans and media and to know our guys' personalities and their stories. And that's where the connection comes to. That's where the connection to a team really grows. So that's what I mean by that. And again, those start with those meetings that I'll have with each guy and get a feel for, because some players don't want their stories out there. They're very they're very tight knit, but that's on us and me to figure that out. And so we can line those up and the guys that are willing to do that kind of stuff, we can set them up.
And just talking generally, University of Illinois, obviously you're coming from a slightly different background. What did you know about Illinois football coming in here, and what are some of beyond learning about the individual athletes and the coaches, what are some of the big things you're hoping to learn just about this program in general in the coming days?
I like to learn the history right away. That's I know it sounds kind of cliche, but you've got to know the program you're working in, right? You got to know the details and where things have come through. Like, right, we've got a meeting today to learn about rivalries and things of that nature. I love stuff like that, because if you don't know that kind of stuff, how are you? All of that projects into what we're going to do ahead, and kind of gives you a baseline of things to know. So I didn't have a ton of knowledge of Illinois football. I remember, certain players like that, and I've been an NFL draft nerd for a long time, and so I remember a lot of players and certain guys that were drafted and stuff like that, and some of the better teams. But like I said, I was a basketball comms person for so long. My focus was on basketball for so long. So I'm 6-7 years into the football deal, and then obviously going from the SEC out west into the Pac-12, I had to learn a whole different league, and I wasn't super familiar with the Pac-12. Obviously, same deal. I knew certain players and certain things about that, but it's just diving in and learning the history. And that, I'm excited for our meeting today with the folks that are going to present to us about history of Illinois athletics and football. And that's the stuff I love to get into.
Thanks, Patrick.
Yep.
Patrick, I got a follow up. I'm wondering if you could take us through how Dunk City might be different in the age of NIL. It became this thing, and no one knows a bunch of kids from Florida Gulf Coast, but suddenly they're everywhere.
Yeah.
And now with NIL, they could benefit from that thing. They could even benefit, I'm guessing, if who claims the name Dunk City, and does the school have that, and are the kids part of that? And Illinois had the Flying Illini in 1989, and that became a moniker that exists today. Can you talk about how that's different once NIL is passed through, with the athletes somewhat involved in that whole process?
Yeah, that's a good question. Until there's a little bit more information on how quickly that stuff can be transitioned into, something they could benefit from. The branding part of it was more of a program thing. So, but the student athletes surely in that time would have benefited. It was such a short lifespan. That's the tricky part to what we're trying to compare it to with NIL, and how quickly that turnaround would have been. But I mean, that was a 10-day chaos. So depending on what the rules are and how quick the turnarounds on that stuff is, it's hard to really predict that stuff. But I mean, say it's a quick turnaround, and maybe after that first weekend of wins, and it's a snap of the fingers and they're able to benefit from that. Yeah, there would have been considerable, advantages to that back then. Those guys they were like rock stars everywhere we went for a handful of days, which is great for them. But it's hard to predict what the benefit would have been. A lot of those guys graduated, but if they were student athletes that were coming back, certainly they could have started to brand themselves as part of that. And, I don't claim to know where the Dunk City came from. It was something we were kind of promoting all year, and not that term. And I don't know when it happened. At some point during the Georgetown game, it became something, but yeah, it's a tough question to answer right now, but it's a great thought of how quick this, if things get passed, how quickly can they benefit of it and capitalize off a big moment like what you're referencing. So yeah, that's something we'll have to think about. It's a good thing to bring up.
Thanks.
One or two quick follow-ups here, Patrick. Coming from Oregon, I feel like Oregon's one of the better programs in the country when it comes to branding, when it comes to the uniforms, the graphics, all of those things that they put out. What were you able to kind of gather from your time there in terms of the branding and the creative media side that could help you here at U of I?
Yeah, I think we were able to do things at Oregon. We were able to get away with things because there wasn't so much tradition in terms of, hey, we're locked into this, certain color code and all this stuff. And it was you got away with a little bit more there, right? And the Nike deal, and it was just like, listen, you can take some chances. And I think, obviously I've been in the opposite, where Arkansas was the opposite. It was very traditional. And we tried to make it a little bit more pushing the envelope. So, and coach will be the first one to tell you, we want to try new things. There's not a bad idea in the building, and we'll find unique ways on social to do some things and help our guys brand themselves with different photo shoots and different things the group is already thinking about. And those are fresh ideas from me, but there's also people here that have had those ideas as well. And I'm excited to meet with them and expand on those. So yeah, there's a lot I can take away. It's not just equipment stuff and uniform stuff. It's, like you said, the branding and things that they do. They're willing to push the envelope there. And that's where really creative things can come from. So I'm excited about that.
And then I don't know if you're going to have an answer to this, but with like EA announcing the college football game coming back potentially, does that affect your role or your pitch to these players coming up? I know there's a lot of unknowns around that, but does that affect your job at all?
I'm not sure. There's still a lot that needs to, I don't know. If certain things are passed, I'm sure there's conversations that need to be had, but I don't know all the details of that. I know that game could end up happening 1, 2, 3 years from now, from what I read. So sure, it's all in play. And those are conversations that have to be had, and educational processes that need to be had. But yeah, I think everybody's excited about that possibility.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yep.
Patrick, I had one quick follow-up. In Bret's presser last week, he talked about, as this thing gets moving down the line with recruiting, you could look at a recruit X and say, hey, this player has similarities to you in the way that we branded him. Is that within the program? Is that something, that, to me, would seem like a lot of studying to do around, the programs and the way that they branded people. Have you thought into that and how that would look?
He's brought that up. We talked about that last week a little bit. Are you saying would it be comparing that person to a former Illinois player, or would it be something? I think our thought process would be to compare them to something national or something else within college football. I know that's kind of a piece that coaches brought over from the NFL is comparing, when it comes to combine stuff, and comparing our guys' tests to different guys that were recently in the combine or been drafted. I think people respond, student athletes respond, and guys respond to that really well to kind of know where they're at. And yeah, it'll be something that we research for sure on a national level of, hey, this is what we can do for you, and this is our thought process of how we can structure it. Maybe here's some examples of what we can do. So yeah, I've thought about that a little bit. I've obviously worked with some student athletes that come from different backgrounds and won different national awards, where there are some similarities that we can look at and when it comes to that kind of stuff. So Yeah, we've discussed that a little bit, and I know he's going to emphasize that within recruiting, but also within the building right now.
Cool. Thank you so much.
Everybody good? Anything else? Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
Nice to meet you guys.
Thanks, Patrick.
Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick. I appreciate it.
See you, everyone.